This is Jason Jones with the City Salt. I'm here with JP Powell of My Radio. He's also an owner of two local restaurants, Lucky and Fortunato. Thanks for being here with us today, JP.
Yeah, man. Of course.
Absolutely.
Happy to be here.
So you've got a new album out. It's called Dadrock with My Radio. It's the first one in some time.
Yes.
And you've got a big album release show coming up at 5 Points on April 18th.
Yes.
Will you tell us about the album and the process of getting it from the starting place to now?
Yeah, so I'll try and make this as quick as possible. The record started back in late 2019 as a charity kind of thing for Family Services of Virginia. They provide mental health services to people who can't afford it, specifically kids. It's a great charitable organization. Anyway, we basically sold songs. So if someone gave this charity money, then I would write a song for whoever, their girlfriend or wife or whatever. And so we kind of made this cool little project, and a friend of ours who we'd worked with before, Mitch, who's a really great producer, musician who has a studio called Fidelatorium down in North Carolina. We were like, all right, let's do this. It's going to be a short 5-song EP, and we were going to release it at Floyd Fest 2020. And we were in the studio that second week of March 2020, and we all kind of know what happened there. So everything got shut down, and we're almost 4 years later. That 5-song EP became a 16-song opus. So it became this long project where we kind of expanded the songs, and then I think it was Mitch who came up with the dad rock. We were making fun of the fact that we were older and a lot of us are dads, and so we're just gonna own that, and so we had a lot of fun laughing about that. But I think we'll credit Mitch with the title. But then I was like, well, we should do comic book art. And so a friend of mine, Cece Bell, who has a book coming out actually, I think this next week, children's book author. Basically, I called her and I said, hey, would you help us with the artwork? And she's like, well, I was getting ready to call you to help me with something. I don't have time to do the artwork because I've got this book I'm doing. But my friend David Lasky, who is a comic book artist in Seattle, I think would be perfect for what you're trying to do. So I reached out to David, sent him the record. He loved the record and said, I'm going to make a comic book that goes along with the record. And so the band, we had very little influence on how the artwork came out. We just had to trust in this process of, so I think it's pretty cool that the comic book kind of stands in its own right, and the music does, but they're kind of fun to kind of experience together. And so, yeah, at the show at 5 Points the Thursday, the April 18th, everyone that comes will get a comic book and a CD, of course, to go along with it. And all of the music, I believe, starting that Tuesday, will be streaming on all the services, Spotify, Apple Music. But that's kind of a general summary of why it took 4 years to get this record out.
Very cool. In the comic book, there's a golden orb that's going through pretty much every panel in it. Is that part of the album, or is that something David Lasky came up with in his art?
That's something that David was trying to find a way to kind of unify all these themes, and that was one of the ways that he decided to do that. I also, there's certain lyrical things that I'll tend to reference a lot, and in many different songs, there's actually a song here called "The Moon and Sun." I talk about celestial bodies, I think, a lot, and so I think he probably picked up on some of my lyrics, and then thought of it as a way to be able to kind of unify these different, because I mean there's a song on it called Jenna, and there's a song called Dorian. They were two of the original songs that were written for there is a Dorian. I've met her. There is a Jenna. I've also met her. Those songs are very kind of classic My Radio, kind of poppy, kind of indie rock, like straightforward. And then through the pandemic, we wrote a bunch of, I'll just say more experimental stuff. There's a song called Birds Aren't Real that I think we were talking about this earlier, I think I was just having fun Googling around on the internet, and I found there was this guy who actually started a campaign called Birds Aren't Real.
Right.
And I think he just did it, as a way to like just kind of poke fun at what we've become as a society. Like we'll believe anything. And I just thought it was like, what a fun thing to write a song about. And we had a lot of fun making that one. But as you can tell, it's a lot more experimental and kind of weird than some of the other songs that tend to be a little more, just rock and roll.
Absolutely. So the album is bookended by the Gift A and the Gift B. Was that part of the original concept, or did that come later?
It was, actually. Thank you for asking that. And originally, I think it was just going to be called The Gift, and it was going to be one of the songs. And I think my idea at the time was, because this was a record that was born out of this charitable event for family services, that I thought, well, that's kind of a cool thing, because I think what we were going to do would be basically, find a way to tie it back into the charity. And so The Gift was this idea of, charitable giving. And it's just like a fun little instrumental thing. And then I think when we made this bigger record, I think it might have been Mitch's idea to break it in two and overlay different things and create a kind of a bookended approach, the Gift A and the Gift B. So
you were drawing on a lot of different influences, whether it be the internet, just everything going on in the world during this time, also the nonprofit that you were doing, or the charitable organization that you were supporting. Musically, where were you coming from? Because there's a lot of different styles.
Yeah.
There's some like more rockin' songs, some like 80s sounding songs, some poppy songs.
Yeah, that's yes, for sure. There's Dorian, which is just straight up 80s rock, and intentionally so. And I think in part we had fun doing that because, again, if you go and look at Mitch Easter's resume, he's mostly known for, creating jangle pop and, doing the first, REM records, along with his friend Don Dixon. But Mitch, had this band called Let's Active that was this great, like kind of 80s sounding thing. So we kind of played into that heavily. Mm-hmm. There's some Wilco influenced stuff on there, I would say. The song Destroyer, that's the one song that our bass player doesn't play bass on, but Al Block plays bass on it. And we wanted to go for it's a pretty punk rock song. So that song was actually recorded differently than the other ones. It's recorded, live off the floor, it's just loose and loud. And I actually play guitar on that song as well, which I'm not a very good guitar player. But when it's easy chords and it has energy, that's where I kind of really have fun with it. So that was definitely it's very, influenced by punk rock. There's the song, trying to think what else. Yeah, the Moon and Sun to me kind of has like a Vampire Weekend, but also a little bit do you remember the band Madness?
No, I don't.
Okay, if you haven't heard the song Our House, such a great song, but I think there's a little bit of that influence in it. And of course when you're working with a guy like Mitch Easter, you can say, hey, Murmur is one of my favorite records. It is a perfect record to me. And it would be I really like this piano sound. How did you do that? And he's like, oh, well, I use this microphone and these settings and I put it over here. And it's sweet. Now we've got that piano sound from that one part of my favorite record on my record, And so Moon and Sun has a little bit of that. Mitch plays guitar on a couple of the songs, and you can really hear it. You can, especially See the Light has a very much okay, that's that jangle pop thing, which is layered guitars. And anyway, it's it was fun to make a record where there were you couldn't say no to something, right?
Sure.
So it's hey, I want to put some crazy instrument on here. It's well, let's try it. Let's see.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we did. Probably the weirdest song on there. There's a couple of weird ones, but a A Walk in the Woods, which is completely improvised.
Did that have mandolin on it?
It has no mandolin. Glad you asked. No, mandolin is on "Don't Walk Alone."
Oh, okay.
Which is one of the last songs.
Gotcha.
And that's played by really like a local guy. I don't know if you've ever met Jeff Midkiff. I think he wrote a mandolin concerto actually that has toured around different symphonies. The Roanoke Symphony debuted it. It's incredible. He's a great mandolin player. But yeah, I asked him to put so that song was inspired by a mariachi band. I heard this. There might have been some tequila involved. But I heard this it was like a Sunday warm afternoon, this incredible mariachi band. And this one song literally had me in tears. It was so beautiful. And so the inspiration for that song came from a mariachi music. And then later we decided to add the mandolin, kind of almost more of that Italian, kind of romantic kind of mandolin kind of thing. But the Walk in the Woods, that's the song that has all the bird noises,
oh, okay,
animal noises,
yeah.
And those are all created by a real person who literally can say, a red-tailed hawk or whatever sounds like this, and can do that bird sound like perfectly. So I was like, this has to be on here, right? Yeah. So I think he did like a squirrel, and there's like tree frogs. And then about 5 to 7 different birds.
Who was that did this?
So his name is Brian LaFontaine, and he is like the naturalist, the on-staff naturalist at the homestead.
Okay.
And he literally leads hikes through the woods and will tell you everything you want to know about nature. And it's a pretty fascinating guy. He's actually going to be at the show too, so I'm excited for
very cool
for him to. And I don't want to misspeak. But Brian has some sort of connection to CBGB's, which was, the famous venue in New York. And I can't remember if his uncle ran it or something weird.
Okay.
And he became friends with Blondie. And
wow.
And so that's actually how we met. So we opened for Blondie when Blondie came here back in 2016, I think it was. And it was great. Debbie Harry's amazing. And so that was like really an awesome thing for us personally. It was like, wow, we're opening for Blondie. This is amazing. But probably a couple years later, I have my kids and we were on this hike and with this person, Brian, who I didn't know, and we're talking about music. And he said, my favorite band is this band that I got to see open for my friends. He was like, I'm friends with Blondie, and I came to their show in Roanoke and I saw this band open for them called My Radio. And I was like, well, Brian, that's me. And so we just kind of became friends after that. He's kind of like my super fan. So he literally will tell people at the homestead when they come stay there, you got to check this band out,
That's
and anyway, he's coming to the show with another employee from the homestead, which I think is awesome. Anyway, we had a lot of fun making this record. It's kind of like, it started as a very simple thing. And then, COVID was hard for everybody. And we were just like, it just became like, okay, you want to try something? Sure, let's try this weird idea. And that's literally how that record got made. And I think for Mitch too, it was just fun to, there's an instrument over here that we recorded that is nonsensical. And we used it because it was just weird and fun to do.
Awesome. How did you meet Mitch to begin with?
So the very first record that we did, I think we needed, and it kind of has like what I would call our hit, whatever. It's our moneymaker song, which is the stupidest, easiest song we've ever written, but it got placed in a bunch of movies and then a TV show called Homeland. So it kind of gave our band notoriety, but also allowed us to continue making records because of the income from those sources. And that song, we needed piano for it, real piano, and the producer we were working with, Ted Comerford, knew Mitch Easter, and he was like, well, I know this guy, he's, kind of famous in the people that are in the know of that kind of music, it's like Mitch is like, it's Mitch Easter, right? He's like, well, he's got this great studio, but he's got this great piano. And so I met him, but like very briefly, and he was very nice. And then we recorded there again, but not with Mitch. And then he would come by and just say hi. And I think it was. I was like, hey, why don't we just ask Mitch if he would produce a record? And then again, that process started in late 2019, not knowing that the pandemic was around the corner. And so I think what would have been a very brief encounter, it just, you know, we ended up spending a lot of time with him, and then the thing just took a long time. Um, but that's how we met. Like it was through someone else.
Can we go back to Al Block real quick? He's
Yeah.
on the bass on Destroyer,
Yes.
and Al used to live in Roanoke. I was able to interview him by phone. He's playing Roanoke here soon too, with Dual Gravitons. Where did you play with Al when he was in town?
No, so Hunter, my business partner, Hunter Johnson, he and I started my radio together. Hunter was, I met him at a coffee shop, and it was like, "Are you a musician?" "Yeah." "Are you?" Literally that's how it happened. And Hunter knew Al somehow through, I don't know if they played together, and he'd always wanted to, you know, play with him on something. And I think again, Destroyer. I don't remember. Actually, yeah, Destroyer was done before the pandemic started.
Okay.
So I'm not even sure we were gonna use that song on the record. We just wanted to record, and so lyrically, I had different ideas about that song. It was gonna be kind of. I think it would have been a really terrible song. I think I was trying to write like lyrics about a girl, and it was going to be like kind of like a more rocking kind of love song. Anyway, we liked the bed tracks and everything, but I hated the melody and what I was singing, and so we just tabled it. And then I think going through the pandemic, and there's a lot of vitriol and anger, and there's just a lot of stuff. And I was like, well, I know what I'm going to write about, so it became kind of more of an angry kind of punk rock tune, and it found its life. And so Al, that's his bag. I think that was one take too. Pretty sure he just showed up and plugged his bass in, and we played through it, and that was it.
Excellent. Back to the pandemic and everything, I wanted to switch topics a little bit over to your restaurants.
Yeah.
What was that experience like? I'm sure
Horrible.
Yeah.
Wasn't prepared for that question. Sorry. It was tough.
Yeah.
Just leave it at that.
Yeah. You made it through, and
We survived. Yeah.
are things back to normal?
Whatever normal is. Yeah. Kinda. It's kind of. Yeah, I'd say it's back to normal. We've got great people working for us. It feels mostly normal. I think people's patterns have changed.
In what way?
They just it's weird. I feel like people went out kind of differently, and now it's like all our business is focused between like 5:30 and 8:30.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like what used to be a very kind of fluid. You'd have people out later, and I think younger people are going out to the few bars that are open late, like and kind of. But there's this weird. I feel like the restaurant scene, and it's not just Roanoke too. It's because I've been to LA several times, and New York and Boston recently, and I see the same kind of patterns that we're going through, or places that maybe would have like, restaurant business and bar business at 11 o'clock at night are now kind of buttoning it up by 9:30, and that's kind of what we've become. So I'm hoping that we can kind of expand our hours, and that requires people coming out later too.
Absolutely.
So I think that's one of the patterns I've noticed. Some of the patterns are not bad patterns. It's kind of what I've gravitated towards too. I mean, you got to remember Well, it started before the pandemic, but Roanoke had no breweries, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've got 11. I don't.
Yeah, a lot.
In Salem, Roanoke, I mean, the area. There's a ton of options, and so I think there's other ways that people go out now, which that's not a bad thing. It's just the brewery culture I think is a really great thing for Roanoke, and we're lucky to have the ones that we have.
Absolutely. It is a big change in that way. How did you end up? I know you went to Berkeley for music and have been performing in bands all along, but how did you end up starting a restaurant back?
A lot of bad decisions, one after the other. No, I think it was because at the time, it was before having kids, being a dad. We were playing a lot more, and at the time we were going to New York and playing, and I think it really was, and then going out to LA because we worked with a small company out there. I mean, we would see these great little restaurants that had really great cocktails and had really good food, but in a very kind of dressed down and kind of like a bar like atmosphere. And so it really came from that. We were like, well, like Roanoke doesn't have like this, and at the time it didn't. We had
Sure.
some kind of restaurants that you'd go out and they were kind of fancier. You had Metro that was playing, but you really didn't have like what Lucky was, and
Sure.
certainly you didn't have restaurants that every restaurant had TVs, and that was another thing. We were just like wanted to make a place that didn't have a TV, so we basically got that idea from just being in New York and going to a couple of these places, and it's like, well, we could do this. I don't think we knew it was going to be as hard as it was, but
Absolutely. And so you're in the restaurant business with Hunter Johnson,
Mm-hmm.
who is also the drummer in My Radio. Mm-hmm. Which came first, the music?
Oh yeah, the music. Yeah, the music came first, and so again, the restaurants were kind of born out of that. Like, we saw these places, and we were like, hey, we could do this, and it was Ed Walker that at the time had some different places, and he said you can, in the Kirk Avenue location, I've always liked that street. I've always felt like it just felt like a place you'd want to walk down, and it just felt like a great place to have a restaurant. So that was just like, hey, let's do this. And we knew this really great chef, Jeff Farmer, who, by the way, another thing that you might or might not realize, it's like restaurant people a lot of them are musicians, first of all. But like the kitchen people that we have working for us especially are huge music fans, and they generally know more about music than I do. They can tell you about this band, who's in the band, whatever. So Jeff Farmer is a huge music fan and has great music knowledge, good taste in music. But Hunter was friends with him, and he was like, if we're going to do a restaurant, this is the guy to do it. And so that he opened Lucky for us, and then opened Fortunato for us, and now he's got a great restaurant over called Stock that we don't have anything to do with, but
Okay.
So I ate there last night. Really cool location.
Awesome. Is he still part of your team, or he's
No. I think the pandemic shook a lot of things up. Going back to that difficult question. Sorry. He had enough, and so I think when he left Fortunato, he was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And I was like, I don't blame you. I was like, get out while you can. I mean, Hunter and I were stuck because we were the owners, but he was, and I think he really truly wanted to get out. And I think it was about a year or so, and then this opportunity came up, and people that are in the restaurant, food and beverage industry, I think it's hard, but they truly, at the end of the day, love it. They love serving people, bringing a great experience to people, and and we're all kind of broken in a fun way, and we're all kind of broken in the same way. And I think I'm glad he's back in the restaurant business, and I'm glad that he brought something that Roanoke didn't have. That's the thing, is like we try to bring something that Roanoke didn't have with Lucky and with Fortunato. Jeff's restaurant, Stock, it's like this kind of Northern European kind of cuisine, and and he's doing it, and it's a unique thing. And
where is it located?
yeah, it's in the old firehouse. So
Oh,
that's
okay.
Church, right? That's Church Avenue.
Yes.
Actually, it's pretty much right across from Old Salem Brewing, which is downtown,
Okay. Very good.
in the old firehouse. Yeah, I guess it's next to the hotel that's there.
So my radio has been going on a little longer than the restaurants. And
Yes.
were you touring since you've had the restaurants at all with the band, or just playing
We
here?
we did a tour for I guess it was our third record, and from like Atlanta up to Boston, and that was probably the last time we officially toured. It's hard, but honestly, restaurants made it hard to tour, but also being parents.
Sure.
So and also it's just what was fun when you're in your 20s gets like more challenging as you it's like, all right, I don't really want to sleep on someone's couch.
Yeah.
Anyone that's done it, and I've done it a lot. The Ford Econoline 350 van. Just it's it's fun and it's great and it really is about the music, but yeah, it gets it's trying.
No doubt. So no big tours planned to celebrate this album?
I would love to. If I could figure out a way to sell that one, I really would like to tour it. I would like to play more than just one show, and I think we will. I just don't know what that would look like. I've always had this like kind of fantasy of like doing a Waffle House tour. If I could meet someone that like had the power to say, you can go play, pick your routing, from East Coast to West Coast,
Yeah.
and just play every Waffle House, I think would be amazing.
Absolutely.
But so if the Waffle House executives are out there listening to this, you just feed us and that,
I love
and
it.
send us on our way. We'll be happy to play.
That's an Instagram account waiting to happen. So, you're playing the show at 5 Points. Has my radio played 5 Points before?
No, oh, that's not true. Sorry, we did a New Year's Eve show there. Gosh, I couldn't even tell you when. That was a lot of fun. But they've changed so much since then, like the sound and I'm not even sure. God, that's been a minute. So we have not played there recently, and so I don't. It's going to be a new venue. I'm excited to play there. I know they do great things over there. I think it's really great that we've got this landscape of music venues that are different sizes and are servicing different, different audiences. I still think we could use one or two more music venues at different size points.
Sure.
Certainly a large one would be great. And we were just talking about Flying Panther. I have not been there yet, but I hear nothing but great things about what they're doing. Of course, Spot on Kirk is near and dear to our hearts. It's a great little venue, but I'm very excited to play 5 Points. I've been there a few times to see bands,
Sure.
and also to kind of like figure out how we're gonna fit on stage and all that stuff. But
I know you all have been rehearsing, I guess, since January in different
Yes.
formations of the band.
Yes.
When was the last actual live show?
Floyd Fest. Well, I mean, I got to play with some of my old bands in Boston just about a year ago, which was great. But the last time my radio played a show would have been Floyd Fest 2021. So we did 2 sets there. I had a great time. And then, we had shows booked we used to do an annual like Christmas show, and we had like a show booked at 5 Points, of course, 2020. That got canceled. 2021, it got canceled, not because of COVID directly, but because, Hunter and I were still trying to unwind ourselves from, the restaurants. And I think we're mostly there. So we're very excited to play because playing music, it really is what keeps us happy. I showed up here today in a bad mood for, I got a ticket.
Oh, man.
My new puppy crapped on the floor. Something else. I got in trouble for bringing the puppy into the bed. Anyway, I was not off to a good start today, so I showed up in kind of a mood. And Hunter actually was like, hey, man, we're here playing music today. You got to check all the other stuff at the door and just be happy that you can make music with your friends. And I was like, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
So, and it always puts everyone in a better headspace. So we're very excited to play music, and we're going to we're sounding, I think, better than we ever have because we're putting the work in. I always say for me, like, rehearsal is, I probably drive some people crazy. I'm one of those people that, like, I force the band to practice a bunch. But I think that kind of stuff really does. You want to be so well rehearsed that when you are playing the show, you're not thinking about anything other than having a good time. And I think that allows you to kind of, really be there for the audience and for yourselves. So that you're not thinking about, like, oh man, what's that chord change? Or I can't remember this, other thing that we did. We just want to be able to go up there and feel relaxed and have a great time.
We've talked about Hunter, and you play mostly keys, some guitar, and do most of the vocals on.
There's my new guitar over there. I don't know if you want to show it.
Yeah, absolutely. You can show it. You're welcome to play a song if you want.
It's very, very yellow. Actually, Mitch Easter helped me find that guitar, and I'd never heard of it. It's called a Fender Tornado.
Nice.
Anyway, it is awesome. I just think you have to be careful what you wear on stage. Like, I don't think I could wear red pants with that guitar. So it's like either black or white or, I don't know, some other color. But
will you tell us a little bit about the other band members in My Radio?
Yeah, so I'll start with Jeff Hoffman, who also does photography work. He great bass player. I think he was the third person that got added. The band started with just Hunter and me. He knew Jeff, and then so Jeff's our bass player, great bass player. He plays with a bunch of other bands in town, and just does a lot of stints at Mill Mountain in their pit. He was the bass player for the Chupacabras. I don't know.
Okay.
Great guy, and that's Jeff Hoffman, and Brett Lemon, whose guitar setup is back here. He is would have been the fourth member that we added. Brett actually might have been the third and Jeff the fourth. I whatever, it doesn't really matter because they all got added very quickly. But Brett is also a photographer. That's his main gig, but he's a really great guitar player. Again, Jeff and Brett were people that Hunter knew, and Hunter reached out to, and that's how the band got started. Our fifth member was an old bandmate of mine in Boston, Jake Zuckerman. And Jake, really great guitar player, great musician. I remember meeting Jake. He had just moved back to Boston from Austin, Texas, and it was one of those things. He had no interest in playing in a band again. He toured too much and was like, I'm done. Too many ex-girlfriends and no money, and so he's back in Boston, and we met through a mutual friend of ours, and I think we were out having drinks, and I liked him so much that the other guitar player and myself asked him to be in the band, but we didn't know if he could actually play. We didn't know if he was any good. We just liked him. And so I remember waking up, and this is my old band in Boston called Chauncey, and I remember calling Elliot, and I was like, hey man, that was fun last night. He was like, hey, I was like, did we ask that guy to be in our band? And he was like, yeah, I think we did. And I was like, is he coming to rehearsal today? And I was like, yeah, I think he is. And I was like, oh God, what if he's terrible? like what? Seriously, like, it's like, whatever, it'll be fine. And of course he showed up and it was great, So that's kind of, the five guys of My Radio. My Radio actually got its name from a Chauncey, which is my old band, a Chauncey song called My Radio.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think we started back in like 2007 or 8, and this is really before you had search engines and social media and all this stuff. And I think had I to do it all over again, I realized that My Radio is not an easy name to Google or try and search up, because everything under the sun obviously comes up. And I should have maybe picked a little bit more of a specific name, but it is what it is.
Excellent. So when you were in Boston, did you stay after you were in school? Will you tell us a little bit about your...
I was there for 10 years, yeah. So I I kind of bounced around. I was in the military right out of high school. Then I finished school at William and Mary, and that's when I started playing music again. And I had been in bands in high school, but then I discovered music again when I was at William and Mary, and I fell in love with it. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And I had a band in the Norfolk area for a while, and but I was really frustrated because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to write a song or how to record a song, or I just knew that I liked it. And the drummer in that band actually said, there's this school in Boston, and that's what they do. It's like basically contemporary music. Like whatever you're into, they do it. And so I decided to go back to school, and the best decision I ever made. I think I was telling you this earlier, went there thinking I was done with rock and roll, right? I was done with it. You're dead to me. And I was going to play jazz piano. And I got up there and very quickly figured out that no, in fact, I was not going to play jazz piano, because what I thought was playing jazz piano that I was, fairly good at was like, there was a lot of people who were like so much better. And anyway, I got dragged back into, I guess, the music that I really do love, which is, for me, it started with Beatles records, and just kind of went from there. Otis Redding and, stuff that my parents had on vinyl, and I would listen to it. But, Boston was this great city. I loved, it was the first time in my life that I would go to every class and do all the work, because every class was about music. And it was about the kind of music that I wanted to make. And then I ended up getting in my first, band that kind of did well, was a band called My Favorite Relative. And there were 4 European guys. It was 2 Swiss Germans and 2 Germans. And they heard me playing at a recording session. Basically asked me to be in their band. And it was like, that band was awesome. It was like, everyone was really good looking in the band. Like the 2 lead singers, front guys were tall, chiseled, and we would wear like white suits on stage. So those guys taught me like stagecraft. Like they had it down pat. Like every show, the band looked different, and it was everything was a production for them. And I think we played one show, and we had 7 labels that were like beating our door down. Anyway, none of it ended up happening. We played a bunch of great shows and got to play with a bunch of great bands, but that band fell apart. The drummer, David Spring, and I are still close. David actually did our 4th record. He's a producer out in LA, and he has a studio out there called Dave's Room, but he's recording everyone. I mean, God, he's Dylan, and he's doing great. The guitar player, Ramin, is like a A-list film score. So if you've Game of Thrones, that's our old guitar player, Ramin.
Wow.
Westworld. Anyway, yeah. So he found his calling. And then the other 2 guys were doing a bunch of co-writing and production for Depeche Mode. And, so they're, anyway, that's where my email address comes from. My name is JP or John Paul Powell, and they were like, "All right, you're in the band." It's very 80s. All the music was like that 80s revival. A little too early though. I think had we been a little bit later, we would have been right there where we needed to be. But they were like, "Your name sounds too American." So they were the ones that coined Belmondo, which is a French actor, Jean-Paul Belmondo.
Okay.
He's like a 70s French action actor.
Okay.
And so that name kind of stuck with me, and that's my email address, whatever. But so that band, won like a ton of Boston Music Awards, and like that was my first like, okay, this is gonna happen. And then I played in a band, solo artist named Blue. And I was in his band, and we did get signed. We were signed to Sony Aware, and we toured with John Mayer and Train, and got to do a bunch of cool things. The record, really proud of the record. It's a great record. Didn't sell enough, and so that was like kind of like the one and done kind of deal. And Blue and I are still really close, and we're actually currently working on a side project that's going to be kind of an ode to Peter Gabriel. We both love Peter Gabriel, but Blue has worked on a couple of my radio records. He actually co-wrote some of the songs with me on our third record. And he's also out in Los Angeles. Blue's actually recorded here before. So he and I we were in the van on the road on tour with John Mayer, and we were driving through Virginia. And so we've been playing in a band for, I don't know, a couple of years. And we're driving through Virginia, and he was like, we saw a sign for like Blacksburg. And he was like, oh, coming up on the homeland. And I was like, wait, what? And he was like, home? He's like, I grew up in Blacksburg. And I was like, dang. Seriously? I was like, I grew up in Salem. And so we were in a band together and didn't know we were from the same small part of Virginia. Whoa. Which is totally weird. But that was a really fun band to be in, and we did a lot. I remember a weird experience. So when I left Virginia, I was a frustrated younger musician. I had some friends that I knew that I played with that it seemed like everyone was getting their careers happening except for me, and I was just frustrated and stuck. And the Dave Matthews Band, kind of exploded, and I remember meeting them several times when they were getting started out, and we had played shows together. I actually remember being at a party somewhere in Salem with Dave Matthews, and him telling me, he was like, I think we're going to do our some recording and then shop around and get a record deal. And I remember telling him, well, good luck with that, buddy. I think it wasn't because I didn't think they were talented. I just didn't think that anyone could do that. And then other guys that are from this area that I knew that, Agents of Good Roots, I don't know if you're familiar with that band, they ended up like exploding and then getting Dave Matthews manager and getting, and I'm just like, what am I doing wrong? I was just this frustrated kid. So years later, I remember we weren't signed yet, but we were playing one of my favorite venues called the Mercury Lounge. And, we're playing this gig, and it's going well, and I'm like, we knew we were getting signed to someone, we just didn't know who. And in walks this guy, and he flips his hoodie back, and it's Dave Matthews. And he's like, 3 feet in front of me. And I'm just like, isn't life strange, It's just funny. His label, ATO, was interested in Blue, and we ended up going with Aware. But anyway, and then the other band was Chauncey, and that was the band that I sang and was the lead singer and wrote most of the songs for. And that band was a really great band that coulda, woulda, shoulda, and we just broke up. We made a record with Steve Albini out in Chicago, and we had a lot of label interest. We couldn't, music's it's a hard road to go. To tie this back into the restaurant world, when people say, restaurant business, that's a tough business. And I'm like, well, you should try the music business.
Yeah.
Like there's actually one that's tougher than the restaurant business. At least in the restaurant world, people will come because they will pay money for food and beverage. Music, it's, it's, I guess, do it because you love it. And, some people get lucky, and good for them. It's a tough way to make a living. But
will you tell us a little bit about working with Steve Albini? Yeah,
he's great. He definitely, I got a little bit of the same, of course you're there. And so eventually you spend enough time with the person, you're like, so Nirvana,
yeah.
And he's fine to talk about it. Like, he's a really cool guy, actually. Really, really bright. Like, I don't know if you've read anything that Steve's written. He's a smart guy.
No.
And he has a lot of great opinions on music and the music industry. He's very punk rock in that way. Like, it's like you get, just go out, like, take your control of your own business. And I think he's right in a lot of ways. I think that's musicians too often, fall for the trap of like, oh, someone else is going to do all the hard work for me, and they're going to, make this happen. And yeah, they will, and they can, but they're gonna own you, and then eventually, I mean, I've heard more horror stories and seen more horror stories than I've seen kind of successes. One band that kind of influenced me in a way of like what I wanted to be on stage, especially the lead singer. This band from Boston called Accompanying still has a song that I think it's a #1 hit. Like, undoubtedly, like, that's a hit. It's called Love and Disaster, and it's a great song. And that band was signed and dropped, I think, like 3 times. I don't know. I might be getting the story wrong, but I know that the label, like when they decided to drop them, kept their record, kept that song, and just put it away on a shelf. And they were just able to get, I can't remember how they got it back, but they were just able to get it 20 years later. Wow. Of course, they've all moved on and they're older and they have kids and lives and jobs and other things. But they were able to release their record. But it's like, it's really sad. It's like, why did you not just give the band their record?
Yeah.
So, big record labels just, and I, I'm sure there's a million stories just like that. But that band, was really great. And, and it just, it doesn't happen for a lot of bands, but anyway, Steve Albini, just a real pro, like, working in the studio with him is you will be there at 12 o'clock and you will be working until 12 o'clock at night. There's no, and he takes his work very seriously, and he's really good at what he does. He approaches music like photography though. Like, he's like, I'm going to capture the way your band sounds. I'm not going to add a bunch of stuff. And so a record, I'm really proud of the record, but it's, it's a very naked way. I mean, you're familiar with Steve's work. I mean, if you listen to, especially the drum tones, like on the Pixies record that he did, and the Nirvana stuff, I mean, it has, those drums sound, you can tell that Steve, tracked those drums. I mean, it just has like a room presence, but yeah, I don't have anything negative to say about him. He was very much on a schedule. It was great. He always had this like jumpsuit that he wore. It was like a his work attire, I guess.
Will you talk about I guess his style or use of technology? I know we were discussing it a little
and he
bit.
could have changed by now. I mean, this record that I made with Steve, that my band Chauncey made with Steve Albini, we made it probably 21 years ago. So it was like 2003, 2004. So about 20 years ago. Everything was analog. There was nothing digital. I think I don't think there was any technology that was later than 1979. I mean,
wow.
Like literally everything was done to tape, 2-inch tape. Any edits that we made, he cut them out with a razor blade. That's how they used to do it. You could actually remove an entire section of a song, like verse 1, and then you would hang it on the wall with tape. And then if you wanted to fly that back in somewhere else, you would just, and you cut the tape at like what would that be, a 45-degree angle, I guess. And somehow it works. I don't know, it's funny. Like, but yeah, he was kind of like, he definitely wasn't a fan of Pro Tools. And at the time, I absolutely agree with him. Like, most of the digital recording platforms sounded really terrible, actually. The technology has really changed a lot. I think some of in my studio, I have like the Universal Audio Apollo gear, and it models like analog stuff great. And so the technology really has, I think, caught up, but I still think he probably, does it the old way. That's just what he likes.
Does the technology make it, we sort of talked about it, but does it kind of make it a wider platform, more available and more accessible to people to make their own music?
I think so, yeah. I do. I've done a lot of like, I like working in a studio with a producer when I'm doing a band record. I think it's the process. Sure. I love the process. I mean, you end up with a comic book and a CD or whatever. At the end of the day, you've got a record. But if you didn't enjoy making the record and if there's not a story, then you've missed the point, in my opinion. But I do a lot of like project stuff that, like, I had to do these songs for CeCe Bell's children's book. It's like an alphabet book, and every letter has a song that goes with it. And so I did 3 of the songs, and so I did them all here on my studio. And so I like recording here and doing my own stuff. But when I'm doing like a band thing and it's me and as a singer, I like having that extra person who has experience and knowledge, but they're also outside of the band, right?
Sure.
And like in the case of Mitch Easter, he's what I would call a more hands-on producer. Okay. Like give his opinions and ideas, and I really appreciate and like that about him. Steve Albini is very much laissez-faire. Like, you tell me what to do. And you have to coax an opinion out of him sometimes, which is fine. But he really likes the band to chart its own course. But it is good to have that outside person, especially if you get in a disagreement and it's like, I don't think this is good. Well, I do. I think you're missing the point. Can we get an outside opinion here, like so that we have some clarity or focus? I know this from my own experience, and I don't know if you've ever experienced this in your world, but like there's been ideas where I've thrown out. I'm like, well, that's weird, or it sucks, or it's terrible, and you come back to it like months later, even a year later, and you're like, well, that actually was really cool. Sometimes like the genuine things like that. See, that's the thing about rock and roll, pop music, anything that is in this genre that I kind of play in. I mean, it's not classical music, right? It's not like it's not difficult, like hard to compose, like studied music per se. It's simple, but that simplicity can be so tricky and so challenging, because the more simple you make something, the more exposed it becomes. And so sometimes it really is what I thought was like, well, I sang that like a little off. It's like, yeah, you did, but there's something really cool about the way it sounds, and you sound authentic the way you said it. And so in my head, like I'm removing these things because maybe the pitch wasn't exactly what I thought it should be, and someone else is like, yeah, it's not, but it's really cool. So that's why I think it's always good to have like that outside person, as long as you like them and you trust them.
Sure.
At the end of the day, it's all opinions too. I mean, there's bands that you probably love that I probably don't really care for. I'm sure there's stuff that I love that you wouldn't necessarily care for, and that's kind of the cool thing about music. Like, I love meeting someone that's like, oh, U2, I hate that band. I'm like, how can you hate U2? Yeah. They're one of the most successful bands that's ever walked the face of the earth. I don't know, I just don't like them. And it's like, that's okay, it's an opinion. Something about that band doesn't sit with people. Steve Albini hates the Beatles. He's probably said that in print, so I'm not getting myself in trouble. But, he does not like the Beatles, which I don't agree with. I love the Beatles. But that's an opinion, and that's what's great, There's, having kids, I'll tell you what's fun about having kids is you get exposed to music that I probably wouldn't have listened to. Sure. Because I want to listen to what my kids are listening to. And, I'm like, hey, some of the stuff's actually really good. Olivia Rodrigo, like her song Vampire, I'm like, it's actually a really smart song, and well recorded, well done. Of course, Taylor Swift, I went to the movie. Yeah. With all 3 hours of it. And the songs that came up that I knew and that I actually liked, which you can probably guess the ones that I like, tend to be the ones that are like the more poppy, kind of like melodic ones. And I'm like, okay, this movie could have been like an hour and 20 minutes. And it would have been perfect for me. But the thing is, like, my daughter and all these other kids, they love all those other songs that are the 10-minute, like, acoustic, ballady kind of things where she's telling the story. They go nuts for that stuff. It's not my thing, but,
sure. Sometimes I don't like a band at first, and I end up really liking them later on the more I listen.
Isn't that amazing? That is the beauty of music, is when you, and I think some of my favorite bands start out that way.
Same, yeah.
Some of my favorite friends start out that way, where I meet them and I'm like, I don't think I like you. Yeah. And then you end up really liking them. There's something weird about that. Yeah, I'm trying to think what record it was. And I'm so terrible with names and stuff, but like, this is a great example of it. A friend of mine got me this record, then called me and said, take that record, have you opened it? And I was like, no. He was like, you take it back and exchange it, or just chuck it out the window. He's like, it's terrible, it sucks. And I think I had already started listening to it, and I was kind of like, eh. And then about a week later, he called me. He was like, dude, he's like, did you take that record back? He was like, you gotta give it another chance. And I ended up listening to it and ended up really liking it. It was God, what is the band? They're British, obviously. Kind of Radiohead, but more melodic. Why can't I think of? There's only 3 of them in the band.
Muse.
Muse.
Oh, duh. Of course.
Sorry, it's whatever became their big record, and it actually like I was like, okay. I think at first when I listened to it, the production sounded too slick, and that kind of turned me off. And then when I realized that, like, okay, this is actually like there's a lot to this record. Like, there's a lot of great things going on, and I grew to really like that record. But
That's fun.
Radiohead, same way. I remember hearing Creep, thinking like, something about it annoyed me, and maybe it was their hairstyles back then. And anyway, I just like years later, like I was like, okay, whatever, Creep. And I remember years later being in a coffee shop in Boston and sitting there, and this record was playing. And by 75-80% the way through the record, I got up and I went and I was like, please tell me what the record was that you were just playing. And it was this kid who later ended up becoming our manager, which is a really weird story. But he was like, that's OK Computer by Radiohead. And I was sold. And then, of course, I went back and I listened to the Bends, and I'm like, incredible record. Anyway.
I saw Radiohead and didn't know any of their songs, really, and Bonnaroo, and was kind of blown away.
Yeah, they're kind of amazing.
Yeah.
They're kind of amazing.
Really.
I wish they would get back to the rock and roll again a little bit more, but I love it that they experiment and try new things. And
Absolutely. Well, I know we've been here for a while, so we'll wrap it up. Looking forward to the show in April 18th at 5 Points.
Yes.
Everybody's
Same.
getting a CD and a comic book.
Everyone gets a comic book and a CD, and then of course all the streaming services. It's out there, for free. But we thought this was a cool way to be able for everyone to leave, and we've got some really cool merch that Press is doing for us as well.
Sweet.
That has some of my favorite art panels from the comic book on the T-shirts. And what's great is David Lasky, the comic book artist. He's like, I reached out to a friend of mine who does work with indie bands, and he was like, so basically, since I've already done the comic book for you, he was like, you just need to send me a couple of shirts, and I like them in black. So that's how he's getting paid for his having to resize or do whatever work he did for the T-shirts. And of course, there's going to be Dadrocker hats, which I'm very excited about.
Excellent.
Misspelled, of course.
Awesome.
Just because.
Well, we're looking forward to it. Thanks so much, JP.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.